When a killer targets someone living alone, the first priority is total erasure. Clothes are burned, weapons hidden, and the scene scrubbed. For investigators walking into that space, it's an immediate brick wall. There are no security cameras capturing the struggle. There are no neighbors to interview. The human element has been completely neutralized. But in their rush to destroy physical evidence, perpetrators routinely overlook a massive vulnerability. They look right past the victim's pet. To an intruder, a dog in the hallway or a bird in the corner is just background noise, a piece of furniture. Modern forensic science, however, has learned to categorize these ignored animals into 3 categories of evidence: the alarm, the trace, and the echo. The everyday natural instincts of a domestic pet can be translated into undeniable legal proof that places a suspect directly at the scene. The first category is the alarm. In September 2018, the initial sign of a brutal murder was a golden retriever named Joe running loose on an empty road at 3 in the morning. Dogs are strictly bound by their routines. They do not go on unsupervised, middle-of-the-night walks. For the patrolman who picked Joe up, an unharmed dog wandering the streets hours before dawn signaled a sharp disruption at home. That single behavioral anomaly forced the officer to trace the caller back to a nearby address. By 4 a.m., police were inside the house, discovering the owner, Fred Boot, deceased on the 2nd floor. Because the authorities arrived so quickly, the killer was still scrambling across town, actively trying to burn his clothes and establish an alibi. By simply breaking his normal routine, Joe acted as a biological tripwire. He shattered the timeline the perpetrator needed to disappear, launching the investigation before the killer even had time to wash his hands. Sometimes, the animal physically engages the intruder. In the winter of 2001, police arrived at a home in southeast Dallas to find Kevin Butler murdered and his house ransacked. The perpetrators had taken their time sanitizing the area, but they hadn't planned for a struggle with the victim's 18-inch white-crested cockatoo, affectionately named Bird. During the attack, Bird lunged at the intruders. In doing so, his beak and claws acted like an interactive swab. Even though the killers wiped the rest of the scene, they left their own blood coating the cockatoo, giving police the exact genetic profile needed to track down the primary attacker. Beyond violent defense, pets passively generate microscopic evidence just by existing. We see this in a 1994 case out of Prince Edward Island, a geographically isolated Canadian province, where a 32-year-old mother named Shirley Duguay vanished. Months into the search, investigators located a plastic bag miles from her car. Inside was a brown leather jacket, heavily stained with Shirley's blood. They immediately suspected her abusive ex-partner, who lived nearby, but he flatly denied owning the jacket, leaving police without a physical link between him and the clothing. The connection came from the jacket's interior lining. Pressed into the fabric were about 20 thick, brittle white hairs. They were a microscopic match to a pure white cat named Snowball, who lived at the home of the suspect's parents. To legally prove that connection, police brought the hairs to Dr. Stephen O'Brien, a geneticist studying hereditary illnesses in animals. His team had to invent a way to extract and map feline DNA for a criminal case, a technique no one had successfully attempted before. This map illustrates the local cat population of Prince Edward Island. Because it's an isolated region, the defense could easily argue that all the island's cats were highly inbred, making any genetic match useless. To counter this, O'Brien's team randomly sampled blood from 20 different cats across the area. The baseline data proved the island cats were genetically diverse. When they finally compared the single viable hair from the jacket against Snowball's blood, the probability that the hair came from any other cat was 1 in 45 million. That single hair provided the critical link between the suspect and the blood-stained jacket. Presented alongside traditional forensics, it resulted in the world's first murder conviction to utilize animal DNA. The final category is the echo. In December 2018, police arrived at a rented loft in San Fernando, Argentina, following a report of a deceased woman named Elizabeth Toledo. While an officer stood guard outside the room waiting for the forensics team, he heard a woman's voice scream from inside. The voice shouted, "Oh, please let me go. Oh, no." When he checked the room, the body hadn't moved. The scream came from a cage against the wall. It was Patchouli, Elizabeth's green parrot. This chart compares the behavioral mechanisms of avian mimicry. A parrot does not absorb complex emotional phrases from a single sharp spike, like a one-night attack. To commit a specific sentence to memory, it requires a prolonged plateau of repetition. For Patchouli to learn those exact words, Elizabeth would have had to repeat them across multiple weeks in that same desperate tone. The bird was recording a sustained history of hidden domestic abuse that had been going on for some time. The bird functioned as a living biological tape recorder. It captured the psychological terror of her daily life, echoing her voice in the official case file long after she was gone. Whether they act as behavioral alarms, trace DNA carriers, or audio echoes, domestic pets have forced forensic science to permanently expand its toolkit. A perpetrator can lock the doors, draw the blinds, and eliminate every human in the room, operating under the assumption that they've secured a perfectly clean escape. But they fail to realize that an animal's presence alone is a form of surveillance. Their routines, biology, and mimicry outlast the crime, turning the quiet companion into the ultimate unbribable witness in a court of law.